In today's video, I'm going to explain why I believe it's a bad idea to attempt living on a steel boat that's 40 feet or smaller. I'll do this by sharing some of my experiences from the past 4 years and explaining the reasons why I seemingly abandoned my first boat. If you've been following this channel from the beginning, you'll know that it was my dream to live full-time on a boat. To start living that dream, I bought this 40-foot steel boat. Little did I know at the time that it would turn into a nightmare living situation. There are two main reasons why I believe that a boat that's approximately 40 feet or smaller is not well suited for full-time living. The first reason is obviously the space, or rather the lack thereof. Now don't get me wrong, a boat trip is fun, even on smaller boats, but only for a limited period of time. Once you start living on the boat full-time, with all your belongings, even just the bare essentials, it gets cramped very quickly. And so, I found myself on a never-ending boat trip, and slowly but surely, the novelty wore off. I think this issue is largely related to the shape and layout of my boat in particular. Since it's an older boat, it's relatively narrow, with a living area not exceeding 2.5 meters for the most part. But what makes it even worse is that the kitchen, living room and bedroom are all on separate floors, meaning I have to go up and down those tiny stairs constantly, frequently hitting my head or my knees in the process. And once again, I'm specifically referring to the shape and layout of my boat, so a similarly sized boat with a better layout could be more suitable, for example, if all the rooms were on the same level. The space issue wasn't even the biggest problem. I told myself that this was the life I chose and that I would eventually get used to it. But then winter came around, and that's the second reason why I had to abandon my first boat. Suddenly, it wasn't just about being cramped or constantly hitting my head or knees. I was also cold. And oh, how cold it could get. The icy winter air seeped in through the gaps in the doors, and the cold got in through the weak, incomplete insulation. But rest assured, I didn't throw the towel at the first drop in temperature. For the record, I spent 3 entire Berlin winters on that boat. And it's in those long, dark winter nights that things get really difficult. As soon as the temperature started to drop, I quickly realized that most boats aren't designed for long-term living in harsh weather, especially one with single-glazed windows and an only partially insulated steel hull. It also didn't help that, on a boat at anchor, I was completely on my own. There was no warmth from the ground or neighboring apartments, and my only source of heat was a small diesel heater, the kind designed to warm up a car in winter before a trip. It became clear that this too was poorly suited for the frosty temperatures that often take hold here in Europe during winter. It simply wasn't powerful enough to heat up an entire boat when General Winter decided to show off everything he had in store for us. I would have loved to install a better heating system, ideally a wood stove, but again, the size and layout of my boat just didn't allow for it. There was simply no way to install a wood stove in any reasonable location, mainly due to the fact, again, that the 3 rooms are on different levels, but also because of the size of the rooms. A wood stove needs at least 40 to 50 centimeters of clearance around the front, and where do you find that in such small spaces as we have on this boat? And so, I was stuck with that damn diesel heater, which, on top of everything, guzzled copious amounts of fuel. Not only did it break my back from constantly holding jerry cans of diesel, but it also put a serious strain on my wallet. And because I was burning close to 100 liters of diesel each week, the interior of the boat ended up smelling like a trucking rest stop. But despite all this, I still tried to hold out. I told myself that winter would eventually end and things would get better. In reality, however, I was forced to wear my big winter jacket indoors. My feet were always cold, no matter how many layers of socks I wore, and my fingers were so stiff that typing on my laptop became a struggle. If I were alone, it might have been okay. I'm a tough guy, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? But I wasn't alone. My wife and our pet dog were shivering right next to me. And so we were stuck in a giant freezer, barely able to live a normal life. I tried to play it cool, to hide my own despair, but sooner or later I had to face reality. This sucked. This was not what I had imagined. Something needed to change. And so, change I did. I got a different boat altogether. One that, first of all, was big enough to accommodate 2 people comfortably, and secondly, its shape and size gave it a much better chance of staying warm in the winter with the living area above the waterline. However, the biggest improvement on our current boat is the heating system. We now have a wood stove, specifically a wood pellet stove, which is not only far more powerful than that little diesel heater, but also costs a fraction to keep it running. And so, the story of my first boat as a whole had a happy ending for us. I managed to live my dream, even if that first boat wasn't even part of it anymore. And of course, I didn't actually abandon it. While I was building the cabin on my barge boat, I kept working on my first boat whenever I could. I built the bathroom, the galley, and even started paneling the rear cabin. All of it at the expense of important work that needed to be done on the barge boat. This just goes to show that my determination to finish the boat is still there, and I hope we can finally complete it by this coming summer. And so, there you have it. I know this is probably not what many of you were expecting, and I'll admit I'm guilty of procrastination and mismanaging my time and money. But looking at the bigger picture, getting this type of boat in the first place was a mistake if the goal was to live on it full time. Had I known that back then, I probably would have started building a proper houseboat from the beginning. But at the time, I simply didn't know any better, so it is what it is. I still hope you enjoyed this little update on my first boat, or rather, an explanation of why it's not featured as prominently on my channel anymore. And I know that many of you have been upset with some of my choices, but I hope today's video helps put your minds at ease.